Hundreds of members of the migrant caravan spent the night sleeping on the streets of the Guatemalan capital. Despite the freezing cold, Honduran citizens, with children among them, tried to get some rest before continuing their journey towards the Mexican border. Honduran migrants say that their journey was motivated by the precarious social conditions in the country as well as the escalating violence. Guatemala's National Immigration Institute has reported that there are 325 children among this latest group, with approximately 100 people from El Salvador joining them as well.
The stories of Hondurans fleeing their country are all very similar. They say they do not have any options here, so they leave to protect their lives.
On April 9th of 2016, I was shot. The bullet went right through me. I sought justice, but authorities never solved my case.
Young people make up the majority of the second caravan. Their hopelessness and fear for the future has forced them to look for new opportunities.
There have been so many deaths. It's difficult not to be affected by them, so I want to be far away.
Many migrants have been victims of violence. Now they have to leave their families.
My mother is sick, and now she's going to be alone. She got shot the same day when I was attacked.
Daily violence has created panic and fear among the population, especially in those who live in the most dangerous areas.
There was a massacre where I was working. They told me they were going to kill me too. That is why I'm fleeing. There's a lot of violence and crime, and we're starving too.
A large percentage of people in the first and second migrant caravans are young people. So the future of Hondurans is fleeing from the country in order to save their own lives.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza met with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday. Arreaza has ratified the commitment made by the Bolivarian Revolution with the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. He also said multilateralism is needed to guarantee peace and that Venezuela continues to suffer interference attempts.
There is an extremist supremacist government headed by Donald Trump that has launched a series of attacks against the Venezuelan people. Venezuela is under an economic blockade similar to the one Cuba has been suffering for 60 years. The world banking system is afraid to work with Venezuela because of these sanctions. We have taken the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals as the core in our policies for the next 6 years. We have been doing it since 2015. President Nicolás Maduro is committed to develop our national policies in the same line promoted by the United Nations for a better country, a better region, and a better society.
Our correspondent Karina Cartagena has more details about this meeting.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has held a bilateral meeting with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Talking to the press at the UN headquarters, Arreaza said they mainly talked about two relevant topics. The first one was the fulfilling of the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The other one was the situation in Venezuela, especially related to the constant attempts made by the U.S. to intervene in the domestic affairs of the Latin American country. Arreaza said that the UN Secretary General expressed he is aware of the situation in Venezuela and that he defends that it should be solved promoting dialogue among the Venezuelan people and their institution. The UN Secretary General has also rejected the intervention of foreign countries in Venezuela's domestic affairs.
That was Karina Cartagena from New York. And while at this meeting, Arreaza while he was in New York, he also met representatives of U.S. social movements. The foreign minister, alongside representatives of the UN, Samuel Moncada, met with a group from the People's Forum who expressed their solidarity with the fight for the sovereignty of Venezuela. They condemned the increasing attacks against the Bolivarian Revolution by the U.S. government. British Prime Minister Theresa May won the no-confidence motion by a short margin on Wednesday. With 325 votes in favor and 306 against, May will remain as Prime Minister. The no-confidence motion was presented on Tuesday by Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn after a majority of lawmakers rejected May's Brexit deal. This has been called the biggest political defeat of any government since the 1920s.
I'm pleased that this House has expressed its confidence in the government tonight. I do not not take this responsibility lightly, and my government will continue its work to increase our prosperity, guarantee our security, and to strengthen our union. And yes, we will also continue to work to deliver on the solemn promise we made to the people of this country to deliver on the result of the referendum and leave the European Union.
Let's hear from our correspondent, Pablo Navarrete, who has more details.
A short while ago, it was announced that British Prime Minister Theresa May had won a no-confidence vote put forward by the Labour Party and their leader Jeremy Corbyn yesterday, following the crushing defeat suffered by British Prime Minister Theresa May in her Brexit vote in Parliament, where she lost by 230 votes, the biggest loss in the recent history by a government. Now, today she survived by a mere 19 votes, with 325 voting in favour or against the motion and 306 in favour. Now, this means that Theresa May has survived in her government for the moment, although there is nothing stopping the Labour Party or any the Labour Party from putting forward the motion of no confidence again. Must remember that Margaret Thatcher did it, I think, 7 times in 1979 before coming to power. Now, the British Prime Minister, before the vote, there had been a discussion about the motion in Parliament, in which Jeremy Corbyn called Theresa May's government a zombie government. And it is certainly true that for the past month, or at least for a while now, that Theresa May's authority has been challenged on numerous occasions, both within her party. She survived a motion of no confidence from within her party, and the government has suffered numerous defeats, with many analysts saying that they are in government but not in power. So Theresa May has offered to speak to the opposition parties for what she claims is to look for a solution, although the Jeremy Corbyn has said that unless her government rules out a no-Brexit scenario, it will not enter into these talks. Now, Theresa May has said she will come back to Parliament on Monday for another vote on the deal. There's nothing to say that there will be a significant difference, so she will be defeated once again. And the paralysis and that Brexit has caused in her government, her ability to govern, seems likely to continue. It's very difficult to predict what will happen. She has survived by a slim margin tonight, but she is severely weakened, and her government is also very much not really in control. So this is how things stand at the moment.
Pablo Navarrete from London. Police in Brazil have fired rubber bullets and tear gas at protesters demonstrating against a hike in the price of public transport. The police also blocked others from reaching the demonstration taking place on the main avenues of Sao Paulo.
We were only making our war cry. Nobody was doing anything against the police, but they started throwing bombs at us. Without any reason, they threw tear gas. We were just sitting on the ground and chatting.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, has more.
We are currently at the famous Paulista Avenue, where students are protesting against the increase of prices in public transportation from 4 reals to 4 reals and 30 cents. Police tried to stop the demonstration shortly after it started. There's a lot of tension at this moment. Police have stopped students from entering the Consolacion Avenue. Police also fired tear gas and rubber bullets at the protesters. But the students continue with their demonstration. It's important to remember that President Jair reduced the minimum wage for 2019, but at the same time, prices for public transport are increasing. That is why students are protesting. We will keep you updated on the clashes between protesters and police.
That was Ignacio Lemus from Sao Paulo. And we have more stories coming up, but we'll be back. Welcome back. A landslide at a landfill near the Bolivian city of La Paz is threatening local residents' well-being. There are concerns that hazardous waste will enter the water supply and even spill close to homes. Community leaders have said that the black liquid emerging from the landfill is dangerous. Municipal authorities are reportedly making plans to prevent contamination. Locals have called for an immediate solution to this problem.
It's a high-magnitude landslide. As you can appreciate, it's too much. Imagine, just beyond the edge where you can see with the cameras, as you can see, there are more cracks beginning to open. And beyond that, residue is leaking out. That black liquid is extremely contaminating.
The Campesino Workers Union Tupac Katari in Bolivia has thrown their support behind President Evo Morales in this year's elections. Primary elections in the Andean nation are set for the end of January, followed by general elections in October. Meanwhile, the implementation of universal health care has been supported by citizens. It will benefit more than 5 million Bolivians who do not have medical insurance. A company owned by Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has been linked to the Odebrecht case and will now be investigated. The Congress has approved an investigation on the consortium that built the South Interoceanic Highway with Odebrecht. Between 2006 and 2008, the consortium hired a company owned by Vizcarra. The president has denied this accusation. Thousands of workers in Peru have taken to the streets to reject a government's reform that is hurting labor rights.
Workers do not want to be exploited anymore. Over 200 trade unions joined together to demand the government repeal a reform that has hurt labor rights. It was established as a way to supposedly promote competitiveness and productivity in the private sector.
We want to say to Mr. Vizcarra that workers and Peruvians as a whole have not given him a blank check to implement labor reforms and cut back the right of the workers. If Mr. Vizcarra does not repeal the decree, workers' unions will call for a national strike all across the country, and he will be the responsible if there is a social upheaval.
Workers will not accept attacks against their rights on labor stability, on collective negotiation, against benefits they have historically earned.
We will not allow them to take away what little we have.
He must think about the working class because we earn so little, and yet they take all the money. It shouldn't be like that.
This reform is also being questioned by several experts.
What he's doing is reducing revenues and the purchasing power of workers. Purchasing power is going to start going in the opposite direction of our economy's growth. We have to think of more competitiveness and productivity, but not at the expense of workers.
Experts assure that Peru has a 40-year history of cutting back rights. Informal work alone has grown from 25% to 75%.
If I want to end informal work, attacking something that does not generate this type of work, like the rights of the workers, will not work. It will only produce more poverty, more insecurity, but informal work will continue growing.
According to experts, one of the goals of these neoliberal policies is to destroy trade unions, which in 1990 counted for 23% of the economically active population, and today they only reach 4%.
Pilots in Argentina have announced a 48-hour strike from this Thursday against regulations favoring the hiring of foreign pilots. 2 pilot unions will take part in the strike against the policy pushed by the National Civil Administration. The measure allows foreign pilots to replace Argentine pilots if they go on strike. Large crowds marched through Buenos Aires to demand the immediate release of indigenous activist Milagro Sala. Wednesday marked 3 years of detention for Sala, who was sentenced to 13 years in prison on Monday. The march included members of the Tupac Amaru Association, the Association of State Workers, and human rights organizations.
This government of Morales and Macri came to bring hunger, came to bring unemployment, and that is why Milagro and the rest of the comrades and comrades of the Tupac are prisoners. Because they gave dignity to their people, because they built homes, because they built factories, and they built cultural centers.
Colombian authorities have partially closed down the Hidroituango Dam project. This happened after a 40-meter wide hole was found underground. Last week, the government activated an alert plan to monitor possible risks around the hydroelectric plant. Around 1,000 rescue personnel have been working to make sure all communities surrounding the dam have been properly evacuated. Hundreds of young Cubans have made an economic effort to meet Pope Francis in Panama. Close to 500 Cubans traveled to Panama to participate in the World Youth Day, a week-long event which starts on January 22nd. Many of them saved and borrowed a great amount of money to be able to fund the $700 trip.
I have always said that I don't want to leave Cuba, but I'm excited to go as Cuban, carrying my flag. In fact, I already have my flag because it's part of my identity, of who I am. I choose to live in Cuba.
There were young people, I include myself among them, that had to pay for the trip, which is very difficult because the salary here is not enough. So I had to borrow money and so on, and I managed to get enough to go to the conference.
2 people have been injured in a fire at the world's oldest commercial rum distillery in Barbados. Fire officers are trying to bring the blaze at the Mount Gay distillery under control. Workers were evacuated shortly after they heard explosions. Mount Gay has been in operation for over 300 years.
The current situation is that the roof of the tank has been ruptured, allowing the flames that is burning the alcohol to escape. And what we are currently engaged in as part of the operations is to ensure that we apply alcohol-resistant foam to the...
We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Welcome back. The son of Press TV anchor Marcier Hashemi has said that he and his siblings have received subpoenas to appear before the grand jury in Washington, D.C. Hashemi, a U.S. citizen working for the Iranian news agency, is currently being detained in a Washington facility. Her eldest son is asking for answers as to why his mother was arrested and said that it is important to look at her body of work. Hashemi has made documentaries on Black Lives Matter and is critical of a lot of the domestic policies of the U.S. government, as well as the wars abroad and the regime change policies that the U.S. enforces. Iran's foreign minister has said that the U.S. should immediately release the Iranian Press TV anchor without further delay.
First of all, Mrs. Hashemi is also an Iranian citizen because of the nationality of her husband, her late husband, and that is why we have a right to continue to look after her interests as an Iranian citizen who has been wrongfully imprisoned in the United States. She is a famous journalist. She's done nothing but journalism, and the arrest of Mrs. Hashemi is a very clear affront to freedom of expression, a political abuse of an innocent individual, and I believe the United States should release her immediately without further delay.
The United Nations has said almost 900 people are believed to have died in ethnic violence in the lead-up to the last month's election in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN said most of the violence occurred in the country's northwest between 2 ethnic groups. And while the bloodshed was not directly related to the election, reports indicate that tensions increased after the groups backed different candidates. The death toll from Thursday's terrorist attack at a hotel in Kenya has risen to 21. Authorities had earlier reported that 15 people were killed. Somalia-based militant group Al-Shabaab claimed that responsibility for the attack. The statement reportedly released by the group said their main motivation was U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
These are the nationalities of the persons who very sadly lost their lives. 16 Kenyans, 1 Briton, 1 American, and 3 persons of African descent whom we are yet to identify.
The Ivory Coast government has responded to the decision of the International Criminal Court to acquit former President Laurent Gbagbo, who was being charged with crimes against humanity.
The government takes note of the decision of the International Criminal Court. The government also notes the ICC prosecutor's decision to appeal this decision. In these circumstances, the head of state and the government have a thought for the victims and assure them of their support.
Since July 2018, there's been a rise in the number of refugee women who enter Greece in a bid to escape gender-based violence. Many have risked death to reach Europe.
This is Jasmine. She fled Iran in September 2015. She was forced to leave her 2 sons behind.
I fled my country without my husband because he was an addict who abused me and my children. He threatened us and forced the boys to sell drugs. I had to run away from home many times.
When she arrived in Greece, she met with a group which promised to take her to Germany once she paid 6,000 euros. Her goal was to be reunited with her son as she sought refuge in a country where she could have a better life.
I wish for no woman to suffer from the same experiences that I have. There are people who take advantage of others because they know you are in need and they ask for sexual exchanges.
Sara and Masa are sisters. They fled to Greece with their children. 2 years ago, they were arrested by police in their homeland. The sisters say they were raped by those police officers. Afterwards, fearing for their lives, the sisters decided to flee their country. They walked for 20 days before finally arriving in Greece. They say while crossing the border with Turkey, they relieved the nightmare of rape. They say 2 other policemen raped them.
Firstly, they separated us, the women and the men. After that, they raped us in front of our children. There were people watching what was happening, but they did nothing to stop it. What happened to us in the Iran-Turkish border is actually quite common.
Sara and Masa roamed the streets of Athens. At times, they slept in the square. People stole all their baggage. A good Samaritan put them onto a group called the Network of Migrant and Refugee Women. Soon after, they met the founder, who informed them that the organization does not even have enough resources to help the women who reach out to them. Meanwhile, many refugee women are often swindled of the little money they have.
A man who was doing the registrations told me that if I gave him $2,500, he could speed up my documentation approval. I was desperate, so I ended up giving him all my money. He did nothing at all. Women should not trust these people. They say they offer help, but they actually do not.
These women are quite brave. They have the strength and courage to try to make a better life for themselves and to stand up against many abuses, aggressions, and sexual violence they face.
In Greece, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras managed to defend his agreement to normalize relations with Macedonia. With 151 votes in favor from a total of 299, Tsipras overcame a motion of no confidence and avoided the need to move the planned general election to an earlier date. The Prime Minister will submit the agreement reached with Macedonian Prime Minister Zoran Zaev to Parliament. Both leaders hope to definitely bury the historic dispute over the legitimacy of Macedonia's name. Marcelo Bielsa, current head coach of the English football club Leeds United, has held a press conference in which he explained his reasons for sending a spy to a rival's training session. So-called Spygate has caused a minor furor in English football. Going into great detail, the Argentine coach claimed that doing so was not illegal. Bielsa added that even though he can't speak English, he can speak about the 24 football teams in the English second division. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, we are on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria, and we're on social media as well. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.